Today's speaker for our Myths and Politics series here at Swansea University is Signe Barfoed, who has a PhD from the University of Kent and has been working on a project in Kalydon since 2011. She's currently a postdoc joined between the universities of Oslo and the University of Reading, entitled Cult Memory and Civic Identity in Kalydon, which is funded by the Research Council of Norway. And the project is centered on how myths, memory, and rituals interrelate with the creation of civic identity in Kalydon. Could you tell us a little bit about your paper today, please?
Yes, sure. So the idea for the paper today was originated from this research I'm doing at the moment in Kalydon, where I'm studying the pottery from excavations of the Artemis Laphria sanctuary in Kalydon. The sanctuary was excavated in the 1920s and 30s, but the pottery and the other finds were never published, only the architecture and a topographical plan, things like that. So then when I saw this or started working with this pottery, I found some Mycenaean pottery, which was very interesting because Kalydon has never really been nobody have ever really found any evidence that could sort of cement that Kalydon existed in the Mycenaean period. There's only found like one shirt here and there once in a while, but not enough that you could confidently say, okay, Kalydon was a settlement in the Mycenaean period. So the amount of pottery is nearly 100 vessels, and about 1/3 of these Mycenaean vessels have this tinfoil on it, which is a prestigious kind of object, which several scholars have argued that are similarly prestigious to silver, gold, and bronze vessels. And these vessels, the gold and the silver and the bronze, are normally thought of just being deposited in tombs and never used, things like that. But research has shown that often there's like use marks at the bottom of these bronze cauldrons, things like that, and they have been repaired. So they're definitely used and not just created to put inside a tomb and then that was it. So my idea for this talk sort of came with this, sprung from this pottery, this body of pottery, and that some of it was so prestigious. One thing was, okay, we can say that Kalydon must have existed in the Mycenaean period, but secondly, it was actually also a quite prestigious site, a significant site with maybe some kind of famous ruler or very powerful ruler in the region of Aitolia. And of course, we do not know for sure, but at least now we have some archaeological evidence that point to the fact that it's a possibility. And then in the paper, I was trying to see if this idea of the Kalydonian boar-hunt was somehow used in the early period in Kalydon, which is of course next to impossible. but we have in later periods we have the Aitolian League and their coinage, and it's depicting a boar on one side and a female on the other, which has been interpreted as Atalanta. So in the classical period, we have a coinage where you definitely have an identity expressed through the coinage. So my idea was to try to trace that all the way back. Of course, because of Homer, who mentions Kalydon several times, and in the Iliad there's a quite elaborate description of the Kalydonian boar hunt. So was this idea of the Kalydonian boar hunt a kind of myth that they used politically to express their identity? So that was the attempt of the paper, the idea anyway.
No, thanks very much. I mean, I think that came across extremely well, and I think the idea of this continuity is really fascinating. Could you tell us a bit more about the wider context of this project? What's going on in Kalydon?
Yes, of course. You have to stop me at some point. No, Kalydon is a fascinating site. There's one unique thing about Kalydon that makes it really interesting to work there, and it is that it has never been built over. So we do not have any problems with modern buildings anywhere in the sites. I think it's about 70 hectares and no buildings, modern buildings, we have to worry about. So basically, if you have an idea for an archaeological project and the money, you can basically decide, do I want to find the cemeteries? Do I want to do that? Whatever you're interested in, you can basically do in Kalydon. And I'm interested in mythology and cult and ritual practice and things like that. So when we found out that the finds from the 1920s to 30s excavations of the sanctuary in Kalydon were not published and were not lost, but were actually all in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, I applied the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports for permission to study it for a postdoc project. And I did this without knowing if I would ever have the money for it. Just jumped into it and didn't really think that I would get the permission. But I did, and then we didn't know how much material there was, because we had the publication, we had the notebooks that mentions, we found a lot of pottery, we found a lot of figurines, but we never had any list or any measurements or anything like that at all. And then it turns out, of course, that there's tons of material. So I'm working on that and finishing the pottery now. I just need to go back to Greece and hopefully one more stay at the museum, then I can finish everything for the pottery volume of the Artemis Laphria pottery at least. But then in Kalydon, since 2011, there was a long gap, but then in 2011, Rune Frederiksen, who's now at the Glyptotek in Copenhagen, excavated the theater of Kalydon. I was involved in that, and then I've been involved since then. And now we're finishing the last touches of that publication, so hopefully it will come out early next year. And then from 13 to 16, Søren Handberg from the University of Oslo started new excavations at the lower Acropolis and found a Hellenistic house, 2nd century BC house, and excavated that. And it was actually also a field school for Danish first-year students at the classical university, classical archaeology at the two universities in Copenhagen and in Aarhus in Denmark. So it was this huge project for these 3 years. And then we are also currently working on that, actually. So a lot of things is happening in Kalydon. Yeah, we're just trying to finish things, publish things now, because there's a lot to do. But it's coming along. It's a long process when you work with pottery. I mean, in the excavations of the lower Acropolis, I mean, even though you find just one house and you think, okay, it's a limited area, it's just one house, there's 3 rooms, there's a courtyard, it's manageable. We pulled like 20,000 shirts of pottery every day. I mean, it was insane. So it's this data processing that takes a long time. So a lot of stuff is happening in Kalydon, which is great, because in Aitolia, it's nearly 10 years ago, they started building a new highway that's supposed to go all the way from Athens up to Yanina. And then it, of course, goes past Kalydon. And in this area, when they were working on the new highway, they found several cemeteries. They found a Doric temple. They found Alikina, the city Alikina, mentioned also in ancient sources. So there's so much happening now in this region. And yeah, and then there's also the Brits that are working in the Ionian Islands. So this region is there's a lot happening. Unfortunately, there's not so much going on in Akanania, north of Kalydon, because the Germans had projects there, but I don't know if they're still working there. But this whole region is really interesting, and a lot is happening. Just hope that things will be published soon. We're trying to do our part.
Something for us to look forward to and to watch out for. It sounds really exciting.
Thank you.
We look forward to the publications. And again, thank you for agreeing to speak today and for giving
Thank you.
such a brilliant paper. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. My pleasure. Thank you so much.